Imagine a scenario where the brightest minds on the planet decide to drill a hole in the casing of a ticking nuclear bomb, hoping that will help it cool down and prevent detonation. Sounds completely insane, right? Yet that's exactly the kind of bold strategy researchers are discussing when it comes to the Yellowstone supervolcano. This could either be humanity's salvation or the trigger for our extinction. Hit that subscribe button because we're about to dive straight into hell. Most people see Yellowstone as just a beautiful national park with geysers and cute bears, but beneath that idyllic picture lurks a real monster. This isn't simply a mountain with a hole, but a colossal reservoir of molten rock the size of a major city that's breathing and building up strength for an attack. The last time it erupted was 640,000 years ago, and geologists are nervously watching the clock, because history has a way of repeating itself. The problem is that this supervolcano generates incredible amounts of heat, and although a significant portion of that energy escapes into the atmosphere through hot springs, it's still not enough. The magma chamber inside keeps heating up, and the pressure continues to build relentlessly. NASA scientists have calculated that if we could reduce the magma's temperature by just 35%, the volcano would most likely lose its explosive potential forever, becoming nothing more than a sleeping giant. And here's where an ambitious plan comes into play, proposed by engineer Brian Wilcox. The idea involves drilling wells around the edges of the caldera, not directly into the lava, but slightly off to the side, into the superheated rock. Water would be pumped into these shafts, where it would absorb the heat, transform into steam, and return to the surface, spinning turbines at power plants. Sounds like a flawless scheme to save the planet. This strategy kills two birds with one stone, because we're not only preventing the apocalypse, but also gaining a source of incredibly cheap and virtually eternal clean energy. Electricity at a cost of $0.10 per kilowatt could power all the surrounding areas for tens of thousands of years. The region's economy would skyrocket to astronomical heights, and the threat of total extinction would vanish. But as soon as we move from theory to practice, a real horror show begins. Drilling to a depth of 10 kilometers in an area with unstable geology is nothing like digging a water well in your backyard. The slightest miscalculation could lead to us triggering the very eruption we're trying to prevent instead of cooling things down. The main nightmare for geologists involves the phenomenon of decompression. The magma masses beneath Yellowstone are oversaturated with gases dissolved under monstrous pressure like carbon dioxide in a sealed bottle of soda. If we accidentally damage the cap of that container, meaning the roof of the magma chamber, the pressure will instantly collapse, and the gases will begin expanding at explosive speeds. Remember what happens when you vigorously shake a warm soda and suddenly pop the cap. Now imagine that instead of sweet liquid, you've got millions of tons of red-hot rock and volcanic ash. The drilling operation could create cracks that weaken the roof's structure, and then there'll be no stopping the catastrophe. The ancient dragon will awaken not because its time has come, but because we ourselves poked it with a sharp stick. There's another risk tied to the very nature of magma itself. We're used to thinking of it as a flowing liquid, but in its calm state, it's more like a thick porridge of crystals and molten material. For the volcano to become dangerous, that sludge needs to become more fluid. The paradox is that our intervention could disturb the fragile balance and trigger the melting of already solidified zones. History remembers cases when drilling in volcanic areas led to trouble. In Iceland, the Krafla project accidentally hit a magma pocket at a depth of just 2 kilometers. The drill bit simply fell into the molten substance, and a fountain of liquid glass shot out. They got lucky that time and no tragedy occurred, but Yellowstone is a beast of an entirely different caliber. If the worst-case scenario materializes, the consequences will be instantaneous and horrifying. The Yellowstone explosion would be thousands of times more powerful than the Mount St. Helens eruption in 1980. The shock wave would wipe out all life forms within a radius of hundreds of miles, and cities like Salt Lake City or Denver would simply cease to exist within minutes. But the physical destruction of the surrounding areas is just the prelude to the end. The real killer will be the ash. A gigantic cloud will shoot up into the stratosphere and blanket most of North America with a thick layer of gray dust. This isn't ordinary dirt, but microscopic glass shards that turn lungs into concrete blocks when inhaled. Aircraft engines will fail, and power grids will go down. America as we know it will be buried alive. The agricultural belt where most of the wheat and corn currently grows will turn into a lifeless desert for decades. But the problem won't be limited to one continent. Winds will carry volcanic aerosols across the entire globe, forming a screen that reflects sunlight. A long volcanic winter will arrive. The planet's temperature could plummet by 10 or even 15 degrees. This means widespread crop failures, famine, and the collapse of the global financial system. Imagine that summer simply doesn't come. Snow falls in July in both Paris and Beijing. Civilization will face a brutal resource crisis leading to wars over food and drinking water. The irony of fate is that in trying to avoid exactly this ending, we might become its authors ourselves. The NASA project is estimated at approximately $3.5 billion. That's pocket change compared to the potential damage from a catastrophe, but the price of error here is infinitely high. Who will dare to take responsibility for pressing the start button on the drilling rig? Researchers argue until they're hoarse. Some claim that doing nothing is even more dangerous because the eruption is inevitable. It's only a question of timing. Sooner or later, nature will pull the trigger itself, and then we'll bitterly regret not trying to release the excess pressure while we had the chance. This is the classic trolley problem dilemma, except all of humanity is now on the tracks. Other experts point out that our knowledge about the structure of the deep Earth is too limited. Current methods of scanning the Earth are like trying to guess what's inside a Christmas present without opening the box, just by shaking it. We can make out general outlines, but not the details. And in something as delicate as supervolcano surgery, every millimeter is critically important. Skeptics also bring up the phenomenon of so-called induced seismicity. We already know that pumping water into underground layers during shale oil extraction can trigger earthquakes. The Yellowstone area already experiences thousands of small tremors every year anyway. What will happen if we add lubricant in the form of water under enormous pressure? Won't that trigger a shift in the tectonic plates? Imagine an open-heart surgery being performed by a surgeon wearing boxing gloves while the operating room lights constantly flicker. That's roughly what our current attempt to intervene in geological processes of this scale looks like. Drilling technologies are advancing, but the risk level remains off the charts. However, there are alternative viewpoints. Some volcanologists believe that Yellowstone's magma chamber is currently in a state very far from critical, and we've got thousands of years in reserve. Why risk it now if our descendants will probably invent safer methods like cooling through nanorobots or something we can't even imagine yet? But drilling proponents counter that we need energy here and now. Yellowstone could become the heart of a new energy revolution for the United States. Imagine a gigantic geothermal plant that operates without carbon emissions, doesn't depend on the whims of wind or sun, and provides stable power. That's too tempting a piece of pie to just brush aside. An interesting fact that few people mention is that water circulating in such a system could become poisonous. Passing through the rocks, it would become saturated with arsenic, mercury, and sulfur. If a leak from the pipeline system occurs at the surface, we'll have a local-scale environmental catastrophe even before the volcano decides to wake up. Additionally, the cooling process itself would stretch over thousands of years. This isn't an instant effect. We'd start extracting heat today, and the result would only become evident after many generations. Is current society ready to invest billions in a project whose fruits will only be seen by our great-great-grandchildren? In a world of short-term investments, this sounds like a pipe dream. Nevertheless, the very concept of controlling natural forces excites the imagination. We're used to feeling like masters of the planet, reversing rivers and draining seas. Taming a supervolcano would be the crowning achievement of human engineering, proof that we've outgrown our fear of nature's forces and brought them under total control. But nature knows how to cruelly punish excessive arrogance. History is full of examples where human intervention led to unexpected disasters. Remember the rabbits in Australia or the tragedy of the Aral Sea. Yellowstone is a system whose complexity we're only beginning to understand, and going at it with a drill might be the height of hubris. By the way, here's a little-known fact. Beneath Yellowstone lies not one but two complete magma chambers. The upper one is more viscous, and the lower one is a huge basalt lens that feeds the upper chamber. NASA's plan only addresses the upper part. But how the lower reservoir will behave if we start cooling its roof, nobody can predict with any precision. There's also a legal aspect. Yellowstone stretches across the lands of 3 states at once: Wyoming, Montana, and Idaho. Who will own the energy? Who will bear responsibility for the risks? If the experiment doesn't go according to plan, lawsuits won't help resurrect destroyed cities. Bureaucratic hell could bury the project faster than geological difficulties. Political will also plays a colossal role here. No president wants to go down in history as the person who accidentally blew up America. That's why the project remains on paper for now, in the form of theoretical schemes and computer models. However, energy shortages and climate shifts might one day force politicians to take this desperate risk. We're frozen on the threshold of an amazing choice. On one hand, safe inaction and hope for dumb luck. On the other, active intervention with the risk of destroying absolutely everything. This resembles the plot of a Hollywood blockbuster, except the special effects here will be real, and there won't be a second take. Perhaps the solution will be some kind of compromise, drilling to shallower depths, using closed-loop systems, or prolonged testing on less dangerous volcanoes. Science doesn't stand still, and what seems crazy today might become the safety standard tomorrow. But for now, Yellowstone breathes quietly, releasing steam, and waits for our verdict. Every time you see footage of Yellowstone's enchanting multicolored springs, remember that's just thin skin on the body of a leviathan. We humans are like mosquitoes landing on a sleeping lion's back, discussing how to use its warmth for our own needs. The main thing is that the lion doesn't twitch in its sleep. At the end of the day, the question of drilling Yellowstone is a question of trust in science. Are we capable of calculating all the variables in the equation of chaos? Or are there boundaries beyond which humans shouldn't venture? Energy is tempting, security is important, but species survival comes first. Write in the comments what you think. Should scientists take the risk and start drilling for energy and salvation from eruption, or is it better to let sleeping dogs lie? Your opinion is extremely important for the algorithms, so don't hold back on words.